Welcome back to the bench, everyone. This is going to be a quick video. I made a trade deal for something that I've wanted for a while with a friend of mine, and I finally got to pick up my new toy today. So, of course, I had to immediately bust into it. I wanted to get a good look at it, but before I actually tear into the thing a little closer, I wanted to make sure I get it on film. So after one of the swap meets I went to, I showed off a few things. I got some tubes and stuff, but I also picked up a Frieden Singer branded Model 1160 calculator with the CRT display. I didn't realize how uncommon it was. I just thought it was kind of cool. But a friend of mine in the radio club really gets into early semiconductor stuff. He's got the PhD for it. And he was really interested in it, and he already collects calculators and that sort of things, and so I figured, well, he's probably a better person to take care of it than I am. I was interested in mostly because of the aesthetics and the display technology that it was utilizing. CRT display calculator, it's just kind of cool. But he had more interested in it, and when I showed it to him, he freaking loved it. I was kind of upset that I wound up with it because he missed out on the event that I went to get the thing in the first place. So I made him an offer for it. And basically said, look, I don't really want money. He collects televisions, and I said, there's just one television that I'm looking for, and if we can make a deal for that, I'd be happy with it. And so we made a straight trade. I told him I either wanted a GE locomotive, I think it's the Model 803, or some variety of Philco Predicta. And he made me the deal that if I traded him that calculator straight over, he would find me a Predicta. And he came through within a week. So I finally, today, got to pick up this guy. Now, I mean, if I was going to own a Predicta, I really wanted either the pedestal, one of the two more vertical mounted varieties, but he managed to find this one. The pedestal ones go for a lot more money, and he found this one, made the deal for it. I went and picked it up today, and I'm just so psyched to have this. Now, there are a few things missing from it. This is a Predicta Holiday, and the Holidays have an antenna mounted on the right side that is spring-loaded. Those are apparently pretty commonly missing. This one's is missing, and they are not easy to find. Oh well, it's not like I'm going to be using it with the external antenna. Anyhow, I can probably figure out how to machine something that looks close enough, just for looks. It is, however, missing the power and volume control knob, which is a bit of a bummer. I'll have to keep an eye out for that. And I believe the three knobs on the side, these are not labeled or anything. I have a feeling these are probably for one of the other sets. I think these are supposed to be a mahogany color to match the cabinet. I've got the overhead light turned off right now because it casts one heck of a shadow on this, and it kind of blurs it out. But originally, we had made a deal for him to find me one of the smaller 17-inch sets. I guess he couldn't find one of the smaller guys, so I wound up with one of the 21-inch CRT units, and I have tested this. According to the guy that we got it from, it had been serviced previously. He had this one, and he had a pedestal. The pedestal was also missing some knobs, sadly, but he wasn't going to part with it. It's iconic. Why would you want to get rid of that? But he said he had both of those predictors worked on, and they supposedly functioned at the time. They were worked on many, many years ago. Now, the first thing I did was I plugged in my CRT tester. I took a look at the back. This is an original Philco CRT. I believe it's a 21 EAP4. And it tests in the good zone. So that was already a plus. I mean, not really far into the good zone, maybe a third of the way in on my Sencor. But I was happy with that. And it has no shorts, and the cutoff was really, really good, well within the range that it was spec'd for. And yeah, operating right at 2.3 volts on the filament, it seemed to function fine. So I did a brief test with my Variac and my isolation transformer because I don't remember whether this is a series strung or a transformer set. I want to say this is all series strung, looking at the filament voltages. They're all odd, 10, 2, 3, 5, whatever. I think most of these were in, because the lower end of this is pretty light. This is probably one of the lightest televisions I have that actually sits on something that isn't a portable. The CRT, I think, is the bulk of the weight, and then some in the metal and the chassis, and the rest of it, not much. But I brought it up slowly. The little lamp behind the tuner came up, and at about 75 volts on the Variac, I started getting the flyback to make noise, and I did eventually get a raster on it. I didn't bring it up to full line voltage because the flyback was making some rather awful noises. It was very, very audible, screeching, and it didn't sound very happy. And I thought I might have heard a little bit of ticking or popping, maybe some light shorts or something. And I did get a decent rectangular, I didn't just get a single bar across it as if the vertical deflection was out. I actually got a rectangular raster. So vertical and horizontal deflection are functional, which is nice. But it just didn't sound healthy. And so I shut it off and got a little bit of burning smell, probably because there's a lot of dust on these tubes, and then having just woken it up from probably maybe a decade of sleep. This has been sitting for a good period of time. But yeah, I am so psyched to have this. I'm a big fan of the Fallout series of games, so naturally they made pretty good use of this style of television in Fallout 3 and 4 and Fallout New Vegas. In Fallout New Vegas, you see a lot of these. A lot of the abandoned motels have Predictas or similar models scattered in and around. So naturally, I had to have one of these to complement my collection. And plus, I'm trying to collect TVs that are fairly iconic. I realized that I have a lot of little TVs, maybe some unusual stuff, but there's certain designs that are just so cool that you have to have at least one up in the collection. And the Predicta, you gotta have one. And I figured, well, I got one of the big CRT ones. That's probably the best of the variety to have. And after having gotten it down here into the basement, I'm not sure if I'm actually going to bother taking it back upstairs. This is it fits pretty nicely on my bench, although it might get in the way of the shelving. I thought it might be kind of nice to just keep it down here. Either way, it's on the bench. I want to slide the chassis out and take a look at it and see what we're up against. So I have to keep it over on this side for the while being because I got other stuff going on in the middle. So I'm going to flip this thing around, and I'm going to pop the back of it off, and we're going to see if we can't slide the chassis out and see what we're dealing with. So one of the nice things about this set is that it still has the original back on, and it looks like there was a little keeper chain that was supposed to keep you from losing it, and the original line cord safety interlock deal is still there. It's a little bit pinched at the edge, but I think it should be okay. The overall condition of the cabinet's pretty good too. I wiped some of it down with Gojo, and it seems to be cleaning up pretty decently. The chassis legs, though, are going to need some decent, pretty good polishing. Same with all this. There's the typical pitting you find on brass. It's been sitting around. Although I'm not entirely sure. I'm assuming this is just a cheap brass plating that's in there. Not quite sure what we're going to find. Now this also has a UHF tuner in it, as well as a great big clunky knob for it back there, which is neat because it's got fine and coarse tuning built into the same knob. So you spin it far enough and it goes to coarse, and then when you go to spin it back the other way, it becomes fine tuning with some sort of little clutch mechanism. It's just kind of neat. Not sure how well much I'm going to be using that, though. Come on. Ooh. Okay, so it's got some sort of a little guide tab on it. That's kind of a nice idea. That way you're not wobbling around trying desperately to find it. So let's see, this is a chassis G4242M, so 185 watts. Good lord. Okay, so... Well, I can see that some capacitors have been replaced. There's some orange drops in there. Chassis looks deliciously sticky. There's some new connections to this. I'm seeing some diodes mounted up here. Not sure what that's about. That's the matching transfer for the antenna. Interesting. Picture tube type 21SFA. Now I tested it as though it was a 21 EAP4. I honestly don't know which one is actually in there because I couldn't see the model number, but it looks like the chassis just bolts in here with these two screws. I mean, that's what the arrows are indicating, so I guess that's what we go with. For record, I've never taken apart a Predicta, but I have watched plenty of videos about Bob Anderson taking them apart, so obviously I must know what I'm doing, right? Just kind of absorb that information directly through the retinal nerves, or optic nerve. Okay, knobs are off. Oh wait, no, I still gotta pull this big booger out. Ooh. Yeah, the UHF knob is something else. Great big sucker. It's got fine, and then it flips over, and then bam, becomes coarse tuning. That's just kind of neat. But yeah, that's there. Now, and I did just have this energized for a little bit, so I do want to be a little bit cautious. It looks like we just wiggle the chassis backwards. Is that all I have to do? Why does it feel like I'm coming up against something? Oh, yeah, the transformer over here is getting in my way. Now, there's going to be a cord that runs up to the CRT. And I gotta be careful because this is our horizontal output tube, and I don't need to put my fingers anywhere underneath that. Okay, well this thing is very dirty, and it looks like it was only cleaned around the areas... What on earth is that one doing? There's some interesting choices made here. Don't know what that's about. Electrical tape is not particularly enticing. It looks like the original electrolytics are still in there. So I'm not quite sure what was done in terms of servicing, except perhaps the bare minimum. Oh look, we got a spare 7.5 ohm sand resistor. I think these are actually supposed to be temperature sensitive or something along those lines. Okay, so here are our sockets. I'm gonna wiggle that one out. Okay, and then we'll just wiggle the big one out. And then this wonderfully electrical taped one right here that's really long, well, go figure, that is our flyback connection. So I need to get inside this little metal sardine can here. Oh, that is soldered on there, so that's a keeper. You put electrical tape right over the original label. I don't like that. It's nice that the labels are still here. What is this doing? This is... I apologize for getting in the way of the camera, but this is just kind of janky to me. Okay. There we go. Yeah, I don't know what the electrical tape is supposed to be doing other than perhaps keeping this in place. We certainly aren't going to be reusing it. Okay. Well, flyback and everything else in there looks just fine. Now, if I remember correctly, the high tension lead should actually just pop right out. I have something that I don't have to touch to get that out. Yeah, everything I've got in here, I should just be able to... Crap. Yeah, a little embarrassing if I can't actually remove that. Alright, let me gently, very gently remove the grid cap from the 1B3. Let's see if we can't wiggle that loose. Alright. Got an RCA 1B3 GT. Yeah, it feels a little sacrilegious to have that in there. And then, yep, that's just a pin, and it pops right out. Look at that. Ta-da! And there is our somewhat kludged. We'll make that heat shrink and clean it up. That's just kind of crappy. And then this one wire here, going off to itself, that's got to be for the video signal. That's what my brain, or my instinct is telling me. But it's really long, so I think I can get that out. There we go. Alright, so we'll tuck that back in there. We'll tuck these back in there. Speaker connections. That is an interesting, very elongated speaker. Not seen anything like that before. I was hoping I'd get lucky and maybe there'd be a knob or something floating around in there, but there's not. Sadly. Oh well. Okay, so there's a pair of rails and... It's a very interesting chassis design. How much did I can see? Practically nothing. Let me aim you down there. So it's grimy, but that's pretty easy to clean. Ooh, these couplets look kind of, I don't know. They're kind of gross looking. So these sets use pre-packaged component assemblies called couplets that have little resistive capacitive networks inside of them. I guess they have a decent failure rate, which means you have to make them yourself. And there's a guy that you can make them yourself. I think I've seen some folks have custom printed PCBs. There's actually a guy that has a website that sells for specific chassis numbers for the Predicta pre-built networks. Brand new ones. You just take the old one out and drop the new one in, and they're even dipped in everything so they look just like the originals, which is kind of nice. Okay, I'm seeing some blob or paste resistors going directly in parallel with pre-existing ones. This is kind of hack jobby looking work. Sockets don't look bad, but okay. Tuner assembly. Yeah, this whole thing is completely foreign. I mean, my portable GE was a stamped chassis set, but it wasn't that bad to work on, really. This is something new. Now, as far as the electrolytics go, I see this one, but is that the only one on the top? It is a 1, 2, 3, 4 section. Is it 4 section or is it only a 3? It looks like it's only 3 section. 10 at 450, 100 microfarads at 200, and then 200 microfarads at 25. Oh, and we appear to have a crystal diode as our detector lead. That's kind of neat. But yeah, some of these component swaps just don't seem very good. That one got left. That's crap. And there's nothing wrong with the orange drops. But if I'm going to do it, I'm going to pull the board up. I'm going to desolder the actual leg of the component. I'm going to drop a new one in. And plus, I'm going to scrub all this garbage off of here because it just looks gross. The rest of the set can look pretty good externally. I'd like the inside of it to, you know, look fairly decent too. This, though, I'm curious about because I don't know if this set originally used selenium rectifiers. This deal here, Philco trademark registration, does appear to be originally some sort of selenium rectifier. Okay. This is our UHF module. Not much use for that, unfortunately. In fact, the UHF antenna connections, or the external antenna, wasn't even hooked up. I think it should have tacked in right here. But everything is there. Let me I'll show you over here at the terminal edge. Got these two guys here for sound. I will just unplug those and then have to watch the video to remember where the heck they go. And then this one is on its own lone peg. And I'm curious what's inside this piece of heat shrink. Is this just a repair to a damaged section, or is there actually something important in there, like a resistor? There's something in there. Interesting. Okay, chassis out. And we can scoot this the rest of the way down. And let's flip this around. Yeah, nice job, genius. Let's put the back somewhere where I can't injure it any further, huh? There we go. Bonus sand resistor, 1B3. And, ooh, duct tape. That's always a good sign. Quality work with duct tape. Wiring looks pretty decent. These have an interesting push-on, push-off power switch. And I actually checked this one, and it does work. So that's nice. Fine tuning is there. Coarse tuning is here. And this just uses a standard wafer switch for tuning instead of the big chunk ones. And let's see what I can grab to flip this up on its end. Okay, so I'm going to reposition the camera real quick because it's kind of hard to see. So this is why I always take it with a grain of salt when someone says, "Oh, it was serviced." Well, how long ago was it serviced, and was the guy doing the work, you know, just doing whatever was necessary to make it functional, or was he actually going through and doing preventative maintenance to make sure it would keep working in the long term? There's a big difference between the two. Most radio shops, radio and TV repair shops, if your TV or your radio had a problem, they just isolated the problem into one or two components or whatever, replaced those, made sure it functioned, and gave it back to you. They weren't going to go through and replace everything. That's a huge value. And if the customer says, well, yeah, no, I'm not going to pay you to completely restore the whole damn thing, replace all the capacitors, just do whatever's needed to keep it going. That's just typically what it was. In this case, however, these capacitors, like this little orange drop right here, these are new enough that this was done within the past few years, I would say. Maybe not even a decade ago. These are still pretty shiny, still fairly recent, and yet despite that, there are sprayed black beauties. There's some original Philco wax caps. There are now a total of 3 multi-section electrolytics accounted for that have not been replaced. So that's a huge negative. I don't actually know what that is. Be curious to know. Okay, there's another new one. See? There's another one new in there. Whatever the hell is going on here. And again, I don't really like this where it's like, oh, there's a component lead, just kind of hacking onto there. If I have to get a component in somewhere difficult, then I will use the J-hook method. I see a lot of these are just sort of a solder blob. They just sort of got them close enough together and then tried to zap the leads together. It doesn't make a very good repair, and it honestly, it just looks bad. You try to do work that's solid and actually looks good, and it should function good too. So all of these, even the new ones, I will be replacing. I'll be checking the schematic to make sure they're the right value in the right place, because honestly, if they didn't even bother to go through and get all the rest of these that are definitely going to be issues, then I can't even trust that they bothered to use the right value capacitors, honestly. I'm not even going to give them the benefit of the doubt right there. They were too cheap to do the rest of them, so maybe they were too cheap to even use the right values. But outside of that, it's pretty unmolested. The original electrolytics are still in place. I imagine it's going to be kind of fun figuring out how to deal with them. This one's got a screw mount point, so adding a terminal strip there should not be too hard. I have at least to the height of this transformer for a terminal strip, so a long one would be easy. This guy is also mounted with a screw. How many sections is it? Looks like it's a single section, but is a floating ground, and there's 2 lugs that they are utilizing for that. This one is a 4 section and is grounded to the chassis. Okay. And then we've got, where is the one electrolytic that's actually on the chassis itself is here. And that is a 3 section. That one might be a little trickier to do, but there's a lot of holes in the chassis, and I'm sure I could easily bolt a terminal strip somewhere in this vicinity and then just reroute these wires to it. I want to try and keep the lead dress original, just because it's not a lot of fun tracking down problems because you moved one wire too close to something else and then you're getting interference, or you're getting coupling from one to the other. Yeah. But, yeah, there's a lot less, because of the PC board architecture that they went with for this set, there's a lot less going on the bottom of the chassis than on a typical television of the period, which is kind of nice. But, of course, that does mean we are going to have to remove the PC board in order to clean it. And there is one, okay, I should PC boards. There's this one over on the left, obviously, but then... underneath this cover right here, there is another one. And you know what? We might as well just pop this open and take a look. Why not? I wonder if I have the writers for that, or I can easily find the SAMs for this, obviously. They're well-known enough televisions. I don't think I have anything that goes up to 1958. Most of my stuff is dedicated around the late 40s, early 50s. Alright, there we go. What do we got under there? A whole bunch of coils. Some dirt. Doesn't look like anything I should have to mess with. It's nice seeing the disc-type capacitors. Just one other thing you don't really have to goof with. Yeah, that's pretty nice. Branded tubes. How much work has this had done on it? I'm not seeing a lot of Philco. I am seeing a lot of General Electric. What is that? That is a 12D4 made by RCA. So, I mean, the guy might have gone through and replaced some tubes, but given how the dirt is sitting on these, I would imagine these have been in there a while. Made this. This looks like it might have been Philco. It's got their yellow lettering on it. Pardon me. And that's Philco tube. Okay, so looks like the tuner section, or this is the IF section, sorry. The IF section is using original tubes. I'm highly unlikely to have, yep, that's a genuine Philco. Okay. So only the stuff that's back here, which I believe this is mostly the deflection circuitry and the audio crap. All these couplets and everything, I'm sure this is probably the horizontal and vertical sync stuff. This transformer right here, our FM sound, is probably going to be in this area. Tuner obviously is over there. What do we got? This is kind of neat. This has a braid attached to it. And that is... Who made that one? That's an RCA tube. I'm asking too much to find in many original Philco tubes. That's a Sylvania. Ah well, that's fine. It doesn't need to have a full set of original Philco tubes. It's just kind of neat to see how many of these actually wound up having to be replaced. Oh, that's a Philco tube. Okay. These sockets are something else. Let's see about this guy. Yep, that's Philco. The print is fading pretty heavily on these. I've also heard that these PC mount sockets can be a little flaky, but these are not wafers. These are like some sort of maybe Bakelite. They are plastic. They look to be fairly robust. The pins seem to be holding on pretty good. I mean, it gave me a raster, so they must at least hold on there somewhat well. And, yeah, gee, these are all very... The whole thing is kind of sticky. Although part of that's from me getting my fingers all over that electrical tape. Okay. Yeah, I think the next thing I'd probably do is just looking at cleaning it up and seeing what I need to do. This board right here would be the primary focus, just because that's where all the major capacitors and resistors that would need to be replaced are. I don't really want to go around taking all these wires off, but then again, that may just be an inevitability. These are not soldered, though. They are just wrapped around the post. Typical wire wrap fashion. The posts are a squarish profile, so when each of the corners really bites in, gives it a good grab. I like using solder. On some sets that I've had these, I've just soldered them afterwards after putting them back on, because when you try to unravel them, they tend to work hard and snap off. So, more than likely, get some fresh wire to put on there to reattach it. And yeah. And if I get the board out, then it'll give me the ability to go through and thoroughly scrub it with a toothbrush and some soap and water and everything, and just kind of get it nice and freshened. Once that's off, then I can go through. And the chassis, the plating on the chassis is in pretty damn good shape. There's just some dirt and dust on there. I might take the air compressor and give it a good blow off. But I think that is going to do it for an initial look. This has already gotten up to almost a half hour of nothing but looking at stuff. So, more exciting stuff coming up. I do want to get this working sooner rather than later, simply because it's so damn cool. And, well, now I've taken it apart, so obviously I have to work on it, right? Right.